Have you ever found yourself needing to access a SharePoint URL for a file, only to be stuck with just the local path? It can be quite frustrating, right? If that's you, then you're in the right place. Today, we're going to tackle how to get the SharePoint URL from a locally synced OneDrive file using C#. I completely understand how annoying it is when you have a file synced to OneDrive, but you can only see the local path. You're definitely not alone in this. Many developers face this challenge when working with OneDrive and SharePoint integration. Let's dive into the specific question at hand. One user asked, how can I obtain the SharePoint URL of a locally synced file in my WPF C# application? They mentioned that when using a file open dialog, they only receive the local physical path. Sound familiar? If so, let's explore this together. So, what's the issue here? When you sync files with OneDrive, they are stored locally, but the SharePoint URL is not directly accessible through standard file dialogues. We need to find a way to bridge that gap in our code. And stick around. I have a valuable tip at the end that will make your coding experience with OneDrive and SharePoint even smoother. To begin, the user needs to reference the Microsoft Graph API in their C# application. This API allows access to SharePoint resources, including file URLs. Next, the user should authenticate with the Microsoft Graph API. This involves creating an application in the Azure portal and obtaining the client ID and secret. After authentication, the user can retrieve the SharePoint site ID. This is necessary to access files stored in SharePoint. The user can do this by making a request to the Graph API. Now the user can obtain the SharePoint URL for the locally synced file. This is done by using the file's local path to query the Graph API for the corresponding file URL. Finally, the user should handle the response from the API to extract the SharePoint URL. This URL can then be used as needed in the application. Fun fact. Did you know that OneDrive was originally called SkyDrive? It was rebranded in 2014 due to a trademark dispute. Now it's a powerful tool for file syncing and sharing. Now let's look at the answers provided by other users. An alternative approach shared by another user involves accessing a specific configuration file located in the OneDrive settings directory. This file contains a mapping between your locally synced OneDrive folder and the SharePoint GUID. By examining this mapping, you can find the SharePoint URL associated with a file. The user also mentions that while you can retrieve the path using the GUID, the spweb.getFile function, which could help in getting the SharePoint URL, is only available on the server side. They encourage sharing any standalone function that could return the SharePoint URL from a local OneDrive file path. Here's the tip I promised. Always check the OneDrive API documentation for updates. APIs can change, and staying informed will save you a lot of headaches down the road. And there you have it. You should now be able to retrieve the SharePoint URL from a locally synced file in your WPF C# application. Remember, leveraging APIs can greatly enhance your applications. If you found this helpful, hit the subscribe button for more tips, and don't miss our next video on advanced OneDrive features.